If you're evaluating software proposals as part of your digital transformation, I can almost guarantee your vendor has it all wrong. I'll explain why here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent tech agnostic consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And one of the service offerings we provide to clients is to help clients through their digital strategy and software selection process. And when we go through that process, we're always amazed at how often the client receives proposals that are completely unrealistic, aren't going to match reality at all, and are likely to lead to cost and time and resource overruns that weren't expected. However, it doesn't need to be this way. If you go into these projects with your eyes wide open and evaluate with a clear set of eyes, then you can actually create a project plan and budget that makes a lot of sense. But in the meantime, you have to recognize the proposal and the budgetary estimate you get from your vendor is highly likely to be orders of magnitude off base. Not because they don't know what they're doing or not because they're necessarily trying to lie to you, but because there's several other factors that come into play, and that's what I'll talk about here in today's video. And if you'd like to learn more about the software selection process and how you can be successful in your evaluation process, including selecting the right software and selecting the right system integrator, be sure to check out our Software Buyer's Guide. It's a guide of best practices and lessons that we have from having helped so many clients through their software evaluation processes. You can download that by scanning the QR code right here or go to the links below. The first reason why your vendor proposal is all wrong is because there are incorrect and unrealistic assumptions. Oftentimes, a software vendor is going to assume the best. They're going to assume that you will make decisions quickly. They'll assume that your data is nice and tidy. They'll assume that you've got the integration and the architecture all figured out. They assume that when they train the trainers within your organization, those trainers are going to know exactly what to do to go train the masses on how to use the software. There's a lot of assumptions like these that are either completely unrealistic or it just doesn't fit your business and your situation. And so that's why it's so important that when you get a proposal from a software vendor, you want to make sure you take it with a grain of salt, because chances are pretty high that the assumptions are unrealistic, and that's okay. But what you want to do is you want to work through those assumptions and modify the proposal in a way that reflects the reality of what you think your organization can or can't do. And this is a tricky nuance because, again, the software vendors are going to assume the best. They're going to assume the best case scenario, and that's rarely the case. And that's a big part of why these projects struggle so much and why they tend to go over budget and take too long. The other reason why vendor proposals are so misleading and can lead to cost and time overruns is because what they propose is typically an incomplete plan. Not because it's not complete in terms of what they need to do to design, build, and deploy technology, but because that's only one small part of your overall transformation. There's a lot more to your project than just designing, developing, and deploying software. However, as a program manager and as an organization that's responsible for the entire change initiative, you have to look at the things that the vendor's not going to do, and you have to add a time and a cost element to that, and you have to make sure that those factors also integrate back to the technology plan. So for example, if we know it's going to take us a certain amount of time to migrate our data, or it's going to take a certain amount of time for us to go through the change management process to redesign our organization or to define our standard business processes going forward, that inevitably means that we're going to extend and prolong the time it takes the software vendor to do their work. Again, it's not because they're necessarily doing a bad job or they can't do it faster. They probably can do it faster. But the point is your business has to change. And there's a lot of assumptions you need to work through to ensure that you are actually able to do the things you need to do to make the project work. So when you get a vendor proposal, the best way to look at it is to say this is a project plan for one work stream within a broader program. And now we need to go through and define what does the broader program look like? What are the different work streams and activities and how do they all tie together? And spoiler alert, chances are pretty high it's going to extend your timeline. It's going to add to your budget. And that's okay. You might as well figure that out now and be realistic up front. But the key here is that when you get those proposals, they're typically incomplete and don't have all those other pieces that you need to make the program complete. Technical deployments are always going to happen faster than a business transformation. And the reason for that is because technology is fairly cut and dry. It either works or it doesn't. You configure certain things, you design it, you test it, And you can have a fully functioning, working technology that's beautifully designed, built, and deployed, but your people aren't using it, or your business isn't adopting it, or you're not getting the business value from it. Those are two very different scenarios. And typically organizations want more than just technology deployed. They want business value, they want people using it, they want the processes to improve, et cetera, et cetera. So when getting a vendor proposal, you have to recognize that even if you're working with a system integrator who says that, yes, we can do change management for you, yes, we can do training and communications, yes, we can do process reengineering, chances are very high, and I'd say 99% of the time, those system integrators, even the big ones, are myopically focused on designing and building technology. When they talk about change management, they're thinking more about how do I train people to complete transactions in a system. And chances are very high that your people need a lot more help with change than that, especially now with technology changing so quickly, and that divide between how fast technology is changing and human and organizational inability to change that fast, that's creating more pressure on change management. It's creating more pressure on organizations to figure out a way to move and keep up with the pace of change of technology. Not to say it can't be done, but it's to say that chances are extremely high that the software vendor is going to build the technology a lot faster than your business is going to be able to consume it. And so you need to be sure that, again, you reconcile those two things, those two conflicts of interest there in terms of business and technology transformation. Another reason why vendor proposals are typically so wrong and so far off base is because the sales reps and the sales industry in general has a conflict of interest with your organization. And that may sound strange to say, but hear me out. What I mean by that is a software vendor sales rep is highly incentivized to close a deal. And to close a deal, you can't freak people out too much. You can't tell them the complete reality of what they're about to get themselves into because it might jeopardize the sale of the software. And we've seen situations where a sales rep has been more forthcoming than the industry typically is. And I've seen deals fall through because the client got skittish and decided it was too much risk and didn't want to do it. So that's every sales rep's nightmare, is to have a deal fall through because they were too forthcoming or they gave up too much information about the risks involved. And so there's a natural human tendency to downplay the risks when you're trying to close a deal. And it's not just closing the deal, it's the timing of closing the deal. Sales reps want to make their numbers. They've got quotas, they've got commissions they want to hit, numbers they want to hit. And so it's really important that organizations recognize that there's a conflict of interest there, and ensuring that the sales rep closes the deal as fast as possible, sells you as much software and services as possible in a way that doesn't necessarily freak you out or scare you out of wanting to do the project altogether. So that sales conflict of interest is something that's very real, and it's just the way it is. But the key here is we need to look through that and look past that to rationalize and validate and create a plan that makes a lot more sense for us as an organization. So I hope this provides some guidance on how to navigate the whole misleading nature of software vendor proposals. If you'd like to learn more, be sure to download our software buyer's guide. It teaches you some lessons and tips on how to select the right software, but also how to navigate the whole proposal process and being realistic about your planning process as well. So I hope you found this information useful, and hope you have a great day. Chances are very high that, it's the timing of closing the deal. Yes, we can do training. I can almost guarantee you that, wow,